the privilege of being part of a student story where when I say, tell me about your college career, and you're like, well, there was one person who all this junk was going on, but Tori was like, you can call me if I need to. It's such a privilege to be part of that story. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Cap and Gown. I'm Rachel Phillips-Buck, Senior VP for Student Success at Ferris Resources, joined today by our president, Matt Boisvert. Hey, Matt.
Hi, Rachel.
I feel like you're finally getting your background worked out, sir.
Well, it's taken some time. At least I had everything ready.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I was going to say is I have a podcast room because I do this podcast and then I do a lot of training and that sort of thing. But every time you would join me on the podcast, you'd have to get a place.
And I liked my place. Like I like that. But what we've talked about organization, and there are people who are like, they want to be able to see it and it's organized, or there are those who like to see it and it's like stacks are okay. And I tend to be the visual. I like to see it, and I tend to have stacks, which leads to a messy credenza and a lot of So
sign of an active mind, Matt. That's all it is.
Thanks, Rachel. My only, as the only thing is that the mother-in-law tongue just keeps kind of poking me.
Yeah, but now it's your friend. Now I think it's pretty permanent. So
I'm really happy to be in this place. So the sun comes in right through that window every morning. It's a beautiful way for it to start.
All right. Well,
and don't forget my lighthouse back here.
And your lighthouse. That's a Lego lighthouse that we did not put together.
2,000 pieces. Olivia, my daughter did a great job.
Goodness for her. Also, I wanted to say, I think our next trip coming up, although I don't think you and I are going, but our team is going to Arizona. Is that right? In a couple of weeks in April. It's almost April. It's pretty crazy. So I think our next trip is to Arizona to do a couple of different conferences. And then I think we're done for a while until summer.
Rachel, this is a sign of, I don't know if I would call it a sign of success or a sign of, I should know exactly where the team's going next. Arizona surprises me. That seems.
Growth. It's a sign of growth. That's all. Good work. Yeah. But also I was going to say, it was 100 degrees in Abilene the other day. So, and it's March. So I think it's going to set us up for a very hot summer. So we should think of some fun places. If your campus is in a place that's cool over the summer, invite us and we will come.
For sure.
All right. Anything else?
I think that's all the chit chat.
Show your Lego boat. Show it real quick.
Thanks. You just were poo-pooing the Lego, and it's just cute. It's cute. I love it. There's a little pail inside of it.
Yeah.
And here's the best part. I can't run it the whole time but I don't know if you see, but it's motorized.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a light.
Yeah, cool.
So that's pretty cool.
Very awesome. All right. That brings us to the State of the Union.
What is the State of the Union, Rachel?
Well, I have some good news as it relates to FAFSA, which is really nice. So it's going great. As of early January, 33% of the high school class of 2026 had filled out the FAFSA, which is nearly a 10% increase from the class of 2023. So that's awesome. They finally have it in a place where they feel really good about it. There's a lot of good feedback about it. And Matt, when we're talking about new development, there's minimum viable product, which is this is a thing that we can use. And then you have your list of like 35 things that you would also like it to do if there's time and we can fit it in the development schedule. So there's a little peek behind the curtain about how we do development.
Well, the way it works is they say, here's the 100 things that if you pay us $2 trillion, here's the 100 things that it will do. And then they're like, hey, we couldn't get to 98 of those, but it does the most important two.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. They made a lot of money and they're like, yeah, sorry, we didn't get those other things. But now they're in a position to get them. So now we're looking at things like being able to use an individual taxpayer ID number to fill it out. One of the things that I think is hilarious is that they're like, hey, the form will now tell you how much federal aid you're eligible for immediately after you submit it instead of having to wait for 3 days, which that seems super helpful.
Yeah.
And then also they've built a lot of things in to try to address financial aid fraud. So you can imagine how often it's hit with fraudulent requests. They've built some things in to try to stop that. But overall, we're having a positive FAFSA season. Knock on wood, it's going well. I just downloaded this report out of Campus ESP. It's called Top Trends in Family Engagement. So,
hey, by the way, I love Campus ESP. They're great people. Like we run into them. You know, so forget the last conference, we were right next to them. But yeah. So it's a good report.
Well, this report is looking at 7.8 million family members across 450 higher education institutions. So I think it's worth a read. There's a lot of data in it. This is what I think is most interesting. So this is focused on family engagement. Here are a couple of the 2026 top trends coming out of this report. Number one, parents expect frequent, personalized communication from their child's institution. Here's a quiz, Matt. We didn't cover this before, but I'm curious to see what you think. Blank % of parents expect outreach from their students' college weekly or more often. What percentage do you think it is?
More frequent than weekly?
Blank percent of parents expect outreach from their students' college weekly or more.
Well, you know, I'm just going to start with the trend first, which is we used to have the helicopter parents, which then became the snowplow parents. And then I think you have the agent parent, right? Like they're like, so this whole move to the AI agents, I think moms and parents have kind of led that, like go do the work for the student. So I'm going to go with 58%.
77% of parents expect communication weekly or more often. That is shocking to me. I don't know, but listen, we're going to have to talk about it because this is like, I'm shocked by that number.
Being a Gen X parent, I don't relate to that.
I mean, or what about whatever we are student, like whatever. My parents had no idea what was going on. All right. Number two, student demographics are changing and family engagement is increasing. So first generation applicants alone are up 12% year over year compared to just 2% growth among continuing generation applicants. And that new population of students has a higher expectation that you're going to involve their family. So that's a really important thing to be watching out for. And then a bunch of stuff about how you can justify your budget to include families in communication. So, you know, we really have seen that dialogue change from when we were working in an institution 20 years ago. And it was like, you know, we were saying FERPA all the time to parents. Like we were just like, remember, we can't tell you anything. And now it's like ubiquitous that you would involve parents. Do you have something to say about that?
Oh, I just think that combination is really important. So that you have this increase in first generation, and then you have this high number of families that want to be involved. And I think, so here's where my brain went. It's so important that the institution is communicating to parents in a way that everyone can easily understand. You know,
for sure. Like, actually, this article is super helpful because it talks about how AI can do things like help you translate, create, edit, translate, personalize, make accessible all of that communication, which I really love, right? Like the bar is much lower to come up with good communication templates to be able to talk to uh, parents.
Yeah, it's not as hard anymore because we have AI. But as far as like the being really thoughtful, I would say like we always talked about in the past, how if you can write it in a simplified way, in an easily understandable way for this audience, you're helping everybody. So
Yeah,
being intentional about this growing population can help you overall.
yeah,
Where I mean, just think about some of the communication that we've seen schools send out, and you're like, what were you even trying to say?
yeah. Short and sweet is better. And then just also just having an ear for language that doesn't actually make sense, right? So we've said this before, bursars and declaring your major and office hours. And there's just a bunch of stuff where you're like, can we speak real words? So anyway,
Yeah,
I think it's
good.
really interesting. And Matt, we're seeing more and more often. I'm thinking about Pikeville, who has a person who is in charge of parent communication. Like that is not an uncommon position to have on a campus. So I really love that. I know that you will love this next article out of Inside Higher Ed, a college where career readiness is unavoidable. And I want to highlight this article. There's some good practical things and some like amazing schools that I want to highlight. But I
Okay.
think it's so important to talk about how we embed this idea of college readiness, career readiness in college. And so you and I feel really passionate about that. We're always thinking about how do we engage students in a way that gives them a view for the future. But also, I think this article points to something which I am really wrestling with these days, which is like, this is a blanket statement. This is not true about all colleges, but in general, colleges are created in systems and processes and positions to be like R1 colleges that have been around for 120 years, right? So it's like, well, what does a college look like? Okay, that's what we're going to do. And one of the things that this article highlights is there are colleges who are like, that's not us. We're not doing that. So I know
Yeah.
we're supposed to have all of these things, but we are a new thing. And I've been thinking a lot about how, especially the schools that we serve, have to be able to articulate that value proposition better because the cookie cutter piece, I think, leaves out a lot of what you could offer students if you're free to just be like, here's what we think we should do, right? So,
Good.
this article talks about how different institutions organize themselves around different assumptions, which I love. I think that would be such a fun, like, brainstorming time. Like, what does this institution organize itself around? What assumptions are we making about how you teach, who our students are, what our value is, what we're trying to accomplish? I would love that.
Yeah. So have we ever talked about perceptual maps or perceptual mapping?
No.
So, okay, well, we're gonna just I'll talk to you now
Okay.
after this
We'll put it on. You'll have
because
your own episode for that.
I think it would be so fun for us to do this. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so two schools that I want to call out. Berea is a work college that requires labor as a condition of their enrollment. Students work 10 to 15 hours a week in their campus job in order to fund their education. There's another school, Paul Quinn College, where it's a private HBCU. They are located in Dallas in a part of the city that is a food desert. So listen to this, their president plowed up their football field in Texas
Right.
and planted an organic garden and sells all the produce. So that's amazing. Like, what are the assumptions there? Like, what is this university built around? But also, there's Kettering University in Flint, Michigan, which runs on 12-week rotations. So half of the student body is always off campus. Half of the student body is taking classes from faculty, and the other half is doing internships, although paid, at companies like Ford, Bosch, GE, NASA, Amazon, hundreds of others. They do it for 12 weeks. They get paid. Usually over the course of 4 years, they get paid between $50,000 and $70,000 in their
Oh,
internship work. They go do that and then they come back and they talk about what their experience was like in the real world. So it's an amazing program. I love this idea of like bouncing back and forth between theoretical and practical. Because one of the hard things when you get your first job is you're like, oh my gosh, all of this I understand in theory, but how does it actually work in the real industry that I'm in? So I think it's so great. One of the things that the school says, though, is maintaining 600 business partnerships, a continuous curriculum alignment with industry needs, and a calendar that operates outside of the academic year are all individually difficult. In order to pull this off, you have to do all three. So I think it makes sense that schools aren't like all in on this, but I think if you could figure out what is a good model for you, it would be really fascinating. I mean, I would send my kid there.
Yeah, well, especially knowing that they'll be able to pay for their tuition. It's gonna be fully funded, and their placement rates are incredible, right?
98% of graduates are employed or in grad school within 6 months of
Yeah.
graduation. Their median starting salary is north of $76,000, and many of the students are graduating debt free. So it's awesome. I just love to see schools that are thinking outside the box. So congratulations
Well,
for you guys.
yeah, exactly as you said. It's just like if you want. So I don't know if you have that article today about like that was giving advice to smaller schools, how to survive.
I
Right?
had to
There,
cover it. There's a
if
dumb.
you're just listening, that's a giant eye roll from Rachel because it was like no brainer stuff.
It was like
But
make sure that you're operating well. You might close. You might need to close.
provide a a strong value proposition.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks for that. Okay.
Wow. Yeah.
Um, I love mainstream articles that talk about higher education. Out of the New York Times, what's driving a spike in college students with disabilities? Reported disabilities rose more than 50% over the last decade across a wide swath of schools, including some that are highly selective. At some colleges, more than a third of students have registered physical or mental disabilities signed off on by doctors, which there's a lot of conversation around what that actually means.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting article about why they think this is showing up. There's a lot of ADHD, there's a lot of autism, there's a lot of anxiety and stress. We talked last week about students requesting accessibility with rooms. They want a single room. And that article was like, sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that actually is a helpful accommodation for students. And sometimes that actually is helpful, right? It isolates them. They need to learn how to get out more. So I think that's worth a read just because this is going to be, I think, a theme that we're seeing more and more often on our campuses that we've got to figure out what to do.
And especially as you have more parents involved, there's going to be a whole lot more pressure on, making sure that their students' accommodations are being managed, supported.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then my last section of State of the Union is all about AI. I'm just so tickled with all of this. I'm going to try to not be like, are we in crazy world? Okay. First, here's my serious article about AI. I mean, they're all serious, but here's my I think this is a really helpful one. This is about oh no, I think we're going to do a crazy town one first. What?
Well, Bailey's got to know. You got to give her like a.
I know. I'm gonna do teaching agent first, Bailey. She's like, which slide, Rachel? Give me a hint. Okay. Canvas just unrolled a teaching agent. It's called Ignite AI Agent. Canvas is used by more than 40% of higher education institutions across North America. Okay. So they just enrolled this agent. It will do what they're calling low value tasks for faculty. So they will do rubric generation, content alignment, discussion reviews. It frees educators to focus more on mentoring, feedback, and meaningful learning experiences. That's what Canvas is saying. Okay. What's interesting is this agent can complete all of these tasks without human supervision. So what they're saying is it's this crazy piece where if faculty start using this tool to remove themselves from the responsibility of providing feedback and having conversations with their students, they're teaching students that they should just go directly to AI, right? So you basically have cut out faculty as an important piece. And like, why can't AI just teach us if that's what we're doing? Um, and they're saying, well, the result of that could be classrooms that really have no human engagement or interaction. It's basically just Canvas doing all of this stuff and the faculty member somehow getting paid for that. But Matt, what I think is crazier is that this comes on the heels of this 22-year-old tech entrepreneur who dropped out of the computer science master's program at Brown University in 2024. He just launched something he's calling Einstein, which is an AI tool designed to connect to Canvas that logs into Canvas every day as a student, watches your lectures, reads your essays, writes your papers, participates in discussion, and submits your homework all automatically without you having to do anything. So I feel really bad for this student because Inside Higher Ed wrote this article on Einstein and was like, it's really interesting. And the student's like, I created this because I wanted us to have a conversation about how AI should be used in education. But then right after they published this article, he got a cease and desist and he had it from Canvas and he had to shut it down. They're like, no, you can't do this because we'll be in big trouble if everybody.
This is why we can't have nice things.
Right. If everybody starts using Einstein for the busy work. And the conclusion of that is that you could have Canvas computer teaching Einstein computer, whatever the subject is, while the faculty member gets paid and the student is on Xbox.
So I'm liking this, and this, I used to always wish that I was born earlier so I could have enjoyed the 70s, and now I wish I was born later so I could have been a student to enjoy. Like, just think, I could have been fly fishing every day and just let Einstein work for me. And then when I graduated, I could have gotten a master's through Einstein while I was fly fishing. And then I could have gotten a PhD, presumably, to which then I could teach while using what Canvas's agent called?
I don't know. Imagine. I don't know.
We have a friend who's like, hey, robots, the future is, you own a robot. Well, I guess we're just very close to that. But
yeah, I guess so.
Just thinking about the Canvas AI, here's what's scary to me. And Ignite. But yeah, what the unintended consequences of removing those tasks. So right now, like when I was teaching, every year I had a teaching assistant, right? Well, when I was in grad school, I was a graduate assistant, right? And so if you take those roles away, like what I learned from Dr. Schlachter at Arizona State was significant for my life. Like really, really great mentoring guidance.
You were his teaching instructor?
I was his GA when I was at ASU.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's that interaction as he's my mentor and, essentially my boss. But then when I was teaching and I had every year, I could tell you every one of my TAs and so when we think about we know that employment on campus improves retention and student success. It improves the connections. It's not only a good connection between the student and their boss, but also then that's an introduction into the department and all of the other faculty in that department. If that's and so why would you, especially in I think you've talked, well, actually your last article addresses this, what work goes away with the integration of AI. So why don't you cover that and then I'll come back to this.
Okay. Well, one thing I want to say before I move on to that is it's really interesting. I think actually one of the remedies to this computer teaching computer junk is what we're saying about institutions like Berea and Kittering, where you're like, how do we actually not based on tests, not based on papers, not based on busy work, but how do we actually put that into practice? Because what if you have a computer teaching a computer and then a person goes to get a job there's going to be some hardship there when they don't have that experience, right? So I think it's a great antidote to this idea. Okay, the last one is called What AI? This is funny because this author asked AI what are the most vulnerable jobs in higher education based on adoption of AI. So he asked all the AIs and they all had different answers. I think it's worth reading. Basically, any routine, rules based, text heavy, workflow driven job is going to be very, very vulnerable. And Matt, they have an equation in this article that I want for our team. Like, I want us to write out and I want us to think through as we're talking about how to continue to implement AI into our technology, into our best practices. And that is a university position becomes more vulnerable to being replaced by AI as more of its value can be described as, are you ready? This is like arrows between each of these things. Receive information, arrow, summarize it, arrow, apply rules, arrow, generate standard outputs, arrow, route it onward. So if you use that equation and you're like, oh gosh, that's what I do, we got to work on it, right? They also say a position becomes less vulnerable as more of its value can be described as, again, arrows, diagnose ambiguity, exercise judgment, build trust, persuade humans, handle exceptions, and take responsibility for outcomes. So I just love that as like a very easy metric to be like, where are we in the value of what we're doing?
So, yeah. Well, when you think about that, like, why do we have teaching assistants? Well, they definitely have these things. They receive, like, there are some things that for Schlochter is not giving me uh, his doctoral, papers to review,
Yeah.
right? I'm running Scantrons. I know the answers to the essays and the short answer questions, and so I'm doing all of that grading, right? But because it's exactly what you said, you receive, you summarize, you apply it, you do the output, right? You route it on. That's easy. But that human interaction with the TA is so vital. Um, but yeah, you can see. So there is this balance between the yes, that's efficiency, and we should look for more efficiency. But also, there's a nurturing that happens on campuses, and we can't take that away. And AI can't replace that. So I love all of the articles that you pulled on this. I think last year FAFSA was the hot topic that we covered. You know, every cap and gown. But I think just more and more as AI just continues to grow, and challenges and all of these little nuances, it's kind of a wild west right now, and that's fun.
Yeah,
I
for
think.
sure.
So,
It is fun to be
okay.
creatively thinking about that. All right. Well, that is the State of the Union. And I'm very excited because we have, I was going to say our newest team member, but she's not our newest team member. She's like our third newest team member at this point.
Oh,
Tori Kneeland, who's our client development coordinator, she's going to join me and we're going to talk about her journey. So, Matt,
thanks,
thank you
Rachel.
for joining me for State of the Union. Tori, hi. Where are you right now?
I'm in Chadron, Nebraska.
Chadron, Nebraska. What is the weather like?
It's like 60s and
Oh,
sunshiny and so springy and beautiful.
that is amazing. Spring is my favorite, even though it comes with like spring fever, like literally like hay fever, But
Mhm.
60s is a pretty nice weather. And you're from Nebraska.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So you're used to, I mean, do you like winters?
You know, I feel like this winter was so mild, and I used to say that I hated winter, but we haven't had but probably like a total of 1 inch of snow, and I miss snow. I actually
Wow.
like seasons. It's nice.
Yeah,
Seasons
that's
go.
amazing. It's funny how, yeah, you don't notice until it's gone. And then you're like, no, actually, I kind of like that. I kind of like having a little bit of snow on the ground. Okay, well, thank you for joining me. I'm not going to say force all of our team members, but I strongly encourage everybody to do an episode of Cap and Gown And I want to lay the stage, and then I have some questions for you about your journey. So, one of the reasons why I ask everybody to do a cap and gown with me is because we're always talking about how we are a company built by practitioners for practitioners. So, in fact, Shauna was asking yesterday, like, can everybody say how many years they worked in higher education and what it covered? And it was like this gigantic list of all of the things that people have done who are on our team. We have a fun history because you used to be one of our clients at one of our schools. So
Mhm.
we worked together for a long time, and then you resigned that position, and then your boss in that position was like, "Hey, Rachel, you should hire Tori." And I was like, "Can I hire Tori? Okay, I'm gonna hire her." So you have a really fun perspective of being both a client and now being able to work with our team. So thanks for joining us. We're so happy to have you, first of all.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
For sure. So I want to go back to your college days because I ask this question all the time. And I was telling you, I think that we have kind of two teams in Ferris. Like, I'm a captain of one team and Matt's a captain of one team. Matt's team is like very successful in college, like did all the right things, like great, like a model college student. And we've got a couple of our team who are on that team. And then I have a team which is like, it was kind of a wreck and I didn't do a great job. And I look back and think, how did that go? And we have a couple of people on that team too. I think you're on my team. So can you talk about when you showed up at college? What did you know why you were there? Like, what was your path to actually go to college? And did you know why you were there?
Oh, that is such a good question. I went to college because it was like the expectation. Like, it's just what everybody does. My parents, that's kind of like, the next step for you after you graduate is to go to college. And then I had this crazy idea that I was going to be the next like Abby Shudo from NCIS. Like, totally don't
Oh,
base your ideas, your career plans, or life trajectory off of a TV show. It's a horrible idea. Um, so yeah, other than that, college is that's how you're going to get a job. That's how you're going to make money. But I didn't know what job I was going to do. I just showed up because that was what was expected of me, and that's how I got there.
yeah. And you came without a major, right?
Yeah, so I came in undeclared because even though I had this Abby Shudo dream in the back of my head, there was part of me that was like uncertain. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I also didn't know what my strengths were. Like, what are my skills? What am I actually going to succeed at? And kind of wanting to keep a little bit of an open mind there.
Yeah.
Uh,
And so, did you have a couple of majors that you were considering, or how did that go?
so I was looking at criminal justice. So when I came on my tour, my senior year of high school, I met with a criminal justice faculty member, and I guess I look back and I don't know why I didn't just declare criminal justice right out the gate. But I was undeclared for the first semester and a half. I golfed for a while, and then I hit the credit threshold. So once you've taken 60 credits for NCAA regulations, you have to have a major. So I picked criminal justice and I said, okay, I guess this is what I'm going to do. And then I had a conversation with a family member that was like, that stuff doesn't leave you at night. It's like really, there's a lot of emotional toll that goes with that. And I said, you know what? That's a fantastic point and it's not worth it. And so, um, I did teeter back and forth between criminal justice and business. And then kind of after that conversation, I was like, okay, I guess business it is.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I said we were talking about this earlier. I was like, Tori, I wish I had known you, right? Because this is my job to like help students figure out. So I want you to reflect on the tools that this your campus had to kind of help you figure out some of those things and like how successful they were. But one thing I want to say is I have found that values, so we talk about personality and we talk about interest and we talk about like all of these different things, but I have found that values so often help a student define their path. And by that, I mean exactly what you said. Like, if you value, work life balance, or if you value security, or you value, like, whatever that value is, that it's like, I don't want to have nightmares about these things that I'm seeing. It's just such a clear, like, okay, well, then I can't do that. Right. And I think so often we miss that values piece of like, what is it that you want to be able to have your life look like beyond your personality and beyond your interest? I just think is a really helpful way to talk to our students about what they want to do with their lives. So, your tools on your campus, tell me kind of how they managed when you were undeclared or kind of moving back and forth. What did they do to help you figure out the path?
Yeah, so I took a couple of like almost like personality tests, just a few different almost like quiz things to figure out what my skills were, what my interests were, because people would ask like, "What do you want to do?" Well, I have literally no idea. Just kind of like I don't I have no idea what I want to do. I don't know what's interesting. I don't know what I would be good at. But a lot of that, like from my memory, was like I would take those tests and then it would populate with some jobs that were available at the time that I could apply for. And I would, like read through the job description and they all sounded horrible.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, okay, I guess we achieved what I'm skilled at, but this is
Right.
absolutely not interesting to me at all.
Yeah.
There wasn't like a lot of like, beyond that, it was kind of like just figure out what do you want to do?
Yeah.
That was kind of the process.
Yeah. It's really interesting to me because one of the things I always say about those assessments is you really do have to have someone sit down with you, and you have to be able to say, so two things. If I were sitting down with a student who was like, I hate all these jobs, right? First of all, I'd be like, well, you're the expert. So we're allowed to say this test is wrong. We're trying to validate this. And if you look at all of this and you're like, these are all terrible, then we can just be like, okay, well, let's start again, right? But the other thing that's really interesting to me is looking at those jobs it's suggesting and reducing those down to the quintessential activities, which maybe is not the field you want to be in or is not like what you want to be doing every single day, but those are a way for you to articulate like what you would be good at, right? But that only comes from a conversation with somebody. It doesn't come from taking it back to your dorm room and being like, clearly I can't do anything because I hate all these things, right? So
Right.
I'm sorry there was no one to chat with you about those. It's so important to be like, you have more expertise than the test does on you.
Mhm.
Um, so did you eventually landed on business?
Yes, yes. I decided business because, alongside kind of what I was saying earlier, business was the program that opened up the most doors. So I'm sitting here going, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what my life is going to look like after college. And business opened up the most opportunity. And I wasn't going to be narrowed to some specific field that maybe I didn't have a long term interest in or skills in. So,
Yeah.
also, it got me out of college just a little bit sooner. So I was like, okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, I actually find that to be very true about businesses on most campuses, that actually sometimes picking business delays the decision, which there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes it's like, I'm going to do this thing because then I can be finished with college and then I can make some decisions about what I want to do instead of being like, no, now I'm pigeonholed into being a CSI employee, right? Okay, so I would like for you to describe what you were like when you were in college. What kind of student were you?
Oh man. I was a pretty quiet student. So I look back on my experience and I was like, um, we work with a lot of people that I love dearly that are super outgoing. And I think like everyone on their campuses probably knew who they were. But my freshman year, I look back and my mom was really concerned about me for a little while. Like all of my pictures, I was just in my dorm room. Like I would be working on homework or like sitting by the washer and dryer working on homework while I did laundry. And then but that whole time like I was a good student. So I mean, I had always been that was the one thing. I was good at my classes. I was excelling in them. But overall I was like pretty shy and reserved. And then I became an RA, so that kind of pulled me out of that just like a little bit.
Yeah.
But those things remained the same.
So do you think, I mean, I love that you said quiet student because this is a thing that we talk about all the time, right? Like where there are students who show up and ask for help and they're like very persistent and they have a whole team that they've built. And then we have quiet students like you and like I would have been, which is like maybe we don't have a lot of lagging indicators. Academic performance is you're doing well in that. You're involved enough that people are like, okay, we don't have to worry about her. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing great. Just because you're not a problem doesn't mean that you're doing great. Do you think at that time that you were sort of invisible on campus on purpose? Did you like it that way? Could you have been drawn out with the right intervention? How do you reflect on that time?
I think part of it was on purpose. And, I was doing just a little bit of reflection. Like, I was actually pretty similar in high school. Like, I look back and the personality kind of actually just like transferred between
Mhm.
high school to college. But I think that, like, underneath the surface, as I am kind of like putting on this front that I want to be shy, I want to be reserved, I don't really want to be known. Under that, like I was like actually like desperate for someone to kind of just like interrupt that and be like, I'm going to choose to know you anyways. Like I'm going to choose to understand you and kind of what's going on beneath the surface here. So I would say it was like continuation. I kind of liked it, but also kind of at the root of it, didn't really like it.
I think, Tori, it's such a good reflection because I would say, the battle that we have for quiet students is I would say I was very similar in that I was I was okay not being known, and actually pursuing me in any sort of way probably would have freaked me out. You know what I mean? I would have kind of been like, ah! But if you think about, we're always talking about belonging cues and somebody like seeing you individually, exerting energy to get to know you, and then casting this vision for like over the next 3 years, here's how I'm going to walk with you on this journey. Although I think it would have been uncomfortable for me as a student, it would have been really nice.
Mhm.
And for practitioners, I think the hard thing is understanding what to do with that initial resistance that you and I both would have had if someone was like, how are you? And you're like, I'm fine. This resistance to being known, and at the same time, not being fine on campus, right? Like being lonely or not feeling like you're totally engaged. Does that reflect your experience?
100%. Absolutely. I think, at first, I just reflect on the people that kind of did exactly what you're saying with me. And typically my answer was, they'd say, how are you doing? And at first it's always, I'm good. Like pretty much like, do not worry about me. I
Yeah,
am totally fine. um, but
for
they just
sure.
persist. They just like persist and keep going and ask again and again and again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about our book, How to Know a Person Deeply. And I was thinking about this idea of presence and how you can tell the difference between somebody who's like, how are you? Fine. Okay, let's get to business. And somebody who's like, no, but for real, like, help me understand what your experience is and what's actually going on. Your fine came so fast, you couldn't even reflect on what was happening. So I know it's not true, right?
Yeah.
Um, so what do you, if somebody had said, hey, Tori, but for real, how's it going? What would you have said to them?
Oh, man, I think that I would have just, like, probably laid it all out on the table. I mean, if they're persisting, then obviously, like, I'll open up to that, and I think that I would have said, like, "I don't like college. This is really hard, and um, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know kind of, like, where I belong here. I don't know if I really like my classes." Like, kind of just, like, opening up, like, I'm searching for something that has more value that can contribute to making this experience better for me, like, w can you help?
Right.
Honestly.
And to offer would be awesome.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so I, here's what I have to say for our listeners. It is hard when a student is resistant to being known. That is really, really hard. But I think what I find, even as I was managing like early alert referrals where students were not doing a great job, and I had to be like, hey, what's happening with you? And maybe at first they were unhappy with me, like, it's none of your business. I don't know you. But I never had a student that stayed in that place. Never. Every student where I was like, hey, what's going on with you? Once we moved past their resistance, they actually were super grateful, right? They were like, thank you so much for noticing me and pouring into me. And so I think part of the thing for practitioners is just how do we move past that resistance in a way that's not scary, but actually really helpful? Because we are like little mice. You have to be really, you can't like run at us. You have to be like, I'll just kind of skirt this. So let's move on to now you've been on campus, you're living on campus. COVID happened your junior year.
Mm.
You moved to online courses. So you became a business major, and all business major classes were online, asynchronous. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much. I
Okay.
mean, I think there were, like, less than a handful of classes that we had in person, but pretty much everything else was online.
Okay. So can you tell us about that experience specifically in terms of how it changed the way you thought about the value of your college?
Yeah. So all of our classes, I mean, I guess like we said, most of the classes were online, and I think a lot of business majors weren't, at least I think, weren't on campus. So there's these classes that don't have set meeting times. I don't know, I didn't know a lot of the faculty. I probably met just a handful of them in person once or twice in my time in college. So we never had set meeting times, and I didn't also know the students in class. Like, we would have discussion boards, but maybe like one a week. And that was the extent of, like, okay, I'm getting to know you. No, I'm actually not. We're just like all talking about this same topic. And maybe I'm getting to know what you think about it. Maybe I'm not.
Yeah.
Um, and so I look back, and, there's a lot of conversation. And I think even one of your articles is about, the value of college. And in that stage, I was totally thinking college is not worth it. Like, there is literally no value here. I am not retaining anything that I'm learning. I'm not even having an experience. Like, I can't even share this experience with my classmates. I remember one class specifically, and I was dying to know someone. I was like, I just need somebody else to go through this with me, and I don't know a single soul in this class. So there's absolutely no, like, no companionship, no camaraderie. It was very difficult to see, like, the finish line as being, I really want to get there. It's worth it. It's exciting to me. It was like, just be done. I'm ready to be done.
Well, I hate to say this, but thank you for a great example of why college is not just about lectures and grades, right? It's like that experience of doing this thing, especially I told you, like, without having this vision of why this is going to help you. I always say I was a psychology major. I wanted to be a counselor. I had to take statistics. It was terrible. But I was like, the reason I'm doing this is to get something that I really want. So I'm just going to live through it. Right. But for you, you're like, I'm not even positive that this thing that isn't going so great is going to get me to a place where I want to be. And so I think that's right. I think for our listeners, thinking about for our smaller schools, being able to really deliver what we think of as college, which is a whole experience with camaraderie and with like making friends and engaging with your faculty in a meaningful way. It's clear from your experience, like that is really, really important as you're assessing the value there. So I'm curious, as you were going through that whole process, at what point were you like, I am just ready to finish and get out of this thing that I'm in? How did that come about for you?
Oh man, I think that unfortunately it set in like really early in my college experience. I remember towards the end of my sophomore year, um, I was like so lost. I mean, the end is like so far off at that point. You've got 2 years left. And I remember sending a message to my family, kind of like, this is really hard. Just think about me, please. I need
Yeah.
help. And my sister-in-law called me and was like, just on the phone with me for 30 minutes as I'm like bawling my eyeballs out. Like, I think I want to transfer. I think the reason I'm having a not good experience is maybe because of where I am. And so I was going to transfer and I got all the way through this process where I was going to have to pay like a huge amount of money and I said, never mind, I can't afford that. I'll just basically in that moment I made the decision. I'm just going to stay. This is what I can pay for and I'm just literally going to make it to the end. So
Yeah.
it was like so early and then from there it was just like okay, the finish line.
Keep going, just keep going, just keep
Yes.
going. Your story also really reminds me about the difference between surviving and thriving, and how I think probably what happened for people around you was they assessed you and they're like, she's fine. But that is hanging on by a thread. That is not like loving it here and feeling like you're getting student development and you're growing and you're right learning things and being creative and that sort of thing. So this idea of like being hopeful versus being defeated, you're saying like very early you were like, I'm defeated, I'm just gonna try to like go through the motions on this.
Yeah, pretty much. We're just gonna make it.
Just march forward. Okay, so you graduated in 3.5 years. You were like, now that I know the finish line, let me get moving on that. And then your institution actually hired you to work with at-risk students, facilitating like referrals and all of that kind of piece. So I want to talk about that just in terms of your experience coming from a student. You have this understanding of what a student might be going through, and then all of a sudden you have engagement with all of these at-risk students and you're listening to them and you're trying to support them. Can you talk about like the hardship of having vision for a student success program but not having the authority to execute? Because I always think of like retention's everybody's job, but it really has to be one person's job and they have to answer to the president so they can say, here's what's broken, we have to fix it. And you were not in that position.
No. I was not. I just, my experience like totally shaped my perspective about how to go about helping students. And then I remember one summer, I I had the privilege of attending a conference and I went to a session that talked about systems change and changing a system. And I just remember coming back and I was like, I don't know why I thought this, but I was like, we're gonna change the system. I think we should change the system.
Yeah.
So I think my experience though, I feel like I reached a point where there was a lot of like uphill pushing, like It's really hard. I mean, systems change. That is like, that's a big old boulder. And so, but my vision for helping students, was there driving me, but it did get a little bit discouraging after a while of what uh, what am I doing this for? Or if I keep pushing, where am I going to get? Am I going to get anywhere? Is there anyone else that thinks the same thing as me? And kind of like, "Oh, what do I do now? I've made it like 3 inches, and I
Yeah.
don't know if I can keep going."
You're like, it's like Mount Everest, and I've gone 3 inches, and it's very hard.
Incredibly.
Well, I think I think a lot of our listeners that would resonate with them. I've had that experience too, where you're like, here's the plan. Anybody, and then it's like, okay. And the thing is, it's not reflective of, like you were saying, you had a great boss, you had great colleagues. It's not reflective of the people that you're surrounded with. It is really hard to change a system that has a status quo built into it for 100 years, right? Like, this is how college is. This is how we need to do it. It's really hard to change a system. So I think a lot of people would commiserate with that. Do you have any advice about how to live through that for our listeners? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, I feel like I learned to take the little wins even when they came. Like maybe it was one student, like maybe it was one student in a week, maybe it was one really incredible interaction in a month. Like maybe, one student comes in and you're like, all I did was point you to the correct office to go to, but like you just like start to see those teeny tiny little things and then celebrate them and enjoy them. Like it's not every day that we get to do like really impactful student work, but every time we get to interact with a student, it's just a joy. And then I feel like the bigger ones came around. I remember I had one student that came to me with a whole slew of things that I was like, I don't know exactly how to help you in this situation. Like you're not living on campus. You are living several hours away with a whole bunch of things. And pretty much all I was able to say is like, um, I understand what you're going through and I'm really sorry. And here are a couple of things that may be helpful to you, maybe won't be, but if nothing else, you can just call. Like, and I think she called and we spent quite a while on the phone. So I feel like that is my advice is take the wins, see the wins,
Yeah.
even and then celebrate them.
It's really interesting because, again, it comes down to how you define your work, right?
Mhm.
So it's like you maybe have a bunch of busy work that you have to get done, but if you define it like be present in the small moments, celebrate your wins, help students feel like they're not alone. And, we're always talking about like the privilege of being part of a student story, where when I say, tell me about your college career, and you're like, well, there was one person who all this junk was going on, but Tori was like, you can call me if I need to. It's such a privilege to be part of that story. And it's hard because there's so many other things going on, but I think you're right. Just having creative partners that we can celebrate those little wins, and then remembering that ripple effect that you maybe don't even know how it changed that student's family tree because they were able to complete their degree, I think is so important. But yeah, rolling that boulder uphill, especially by yourself, can be super hard.
Mhm.
All right. My last question for you is, what would you want faculty, specifically faculty? So I'm thinking about in the class because you were a good academic student. What would you want faculty to know about students who are kind of sitting quietly in the back of the classroom, or not participating in online discussions, or whatever that sort of expression of being a quiet student? What would you say to them? Like, do you have advice about students who seem fine but maybe aren't underneath?
It reminds me kind of exactly what we were talking about earlier when you ask somebody, "How are you doing?" and they immediately just respond, "I'm good." Like, you have to persist. And so I think of, for those quiet students like myself sitting in the back, it's like, don't pretend that know what's going on under the surface or in my head or in my heart unless you ask. Like you don't know what another person is going through until you actually have a conversation with them. And so I think that each student, whether they're exceeding or not, they're worth the investment. They're worth the time, they're worth the energy, they're worth the effort, the commitment to say like, "Hey, how are you doing?" And then persisting like, well, I think we want to take their word for it and believe it when they say, "I'm good."
Good
we,
eye,
we
right?
we want that. Uh,
Yeah.
but sometimes it's a persistence, it's a repeated asking, and just yeah, remembering like they're a real person with a real life, and you don't know what kind of impact just a simple question could have on them in the
Yeah.
moment.
It's so good because, oftentimes we talk about making up stories. So something happens and you make up a whole story about why the other person responded that way or why they acted in whatever way. But it's made up. It's a made up story. And most of the time we talk about that negatively, right? Like someone was rude to you and then you make up this whole story about how they hate you and blah blah blah. But really it was just they were having a bad day. But I think it's a really interesting idea to relate that to people who seem like they're okay. And so you've made up a whole story about like, oh, they're great academically, they're in college, they're having these experiences. But to your point, that is a made up story until you confirm it and really understand actually, no, they are surviving college, but they're not thriving. They're not having a good time. They're not feeling like it's valuable. They don't understand where this is going to take them in the future. Unless you've had that conversation with them, they're okay is a made up story that is just, I think, makes us feel better, maybe, where we're like, yeah, I don't have to worry about them. They're fine. And it's like, worry about me, please. It's good advice for us around our students. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I always am so happy for our listeners and for our clients to be able to know our team because I think it's such a remarkable team and you're such a great addition to it. So, oh, look there. Hey, Chantel. That's who Tori used to work for, who she is amazing in her own right. But good to see that she got to hear some of your stories. So thank you so much for joining me. Great to spend time with you. And for all of our listeners, we will be back in April. I think it's April 7th. And we will talk more about our book, How to Know a Person, the art of seeing others deeply and being deeply seen, which I think is really relevant to our conversation. So Tori, thanks for joining me.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.